Every map, every statistic, every historical date we learn about Hiroshima hides a fundamental truth. The numbers, the charts, the aerial photos, they can't capture what it was actually like on the ground, where real people stood, walked, and breathed. This story is about getting as close as history will allow to that moment, using verified accounts and rare surviving footage to understand what it truly meant to be there. The morning of August 6, 1945, began just like any other in Hiroshima. The air was warm, the light was soft, and the streets were slowly filling with people heading to work, school, and shops. They had no idea that more than 30,000 feet above them, a B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay was closing in on their city. What happened next has been described, debated, and dissected from countless angles. But to truly understand it from the perspective of the people living their ordinary lives, we have to slow down. We have to follow the details that remain documented and widely verified by historians over decades, based on historical records. The first sign of anything unusual came just after 7 a.m. An air raid warning sounded briefly, but it was lifted quickly. Only a small number of aircraft were spotted, and many residents likely assumed it was just another false alarm. These had become common as Japan's air defenses weakened late in the war. So, life continued. Street vendors opened their stalls. Children walked in clusters toward their schools. Workers biked along the riverbanks, enjoying the morning air. The exact perspective from street level varies in survivor accounts, but one thing is consistent: a blinding, silent, white flash, brighter than anything anyone had ever imagined. These descriptions come from documented testimonies collected over many years. What can't be confirmed with certainty is what each person saw first. Some said the sky turned white, others recalled it flashing blue or violet. Human memory under such extreme trauma is imperfect, but the overwhelming intensity of that moment is not in doubt. Immediately following the flash, a shockwave of unimaginable force burst outward, flattening buildings in a matter of seconds. The footage we have taken in the hours and days that followed shows this devastation. We see empty foundations where homes once stood, roads completely buried in debris, and the famous blast shadows burned into stone. These shadows, including the haunting outline of a person who was sitting on steps, are documented photographic evidence of how intense the thermal radiation was. But there is no footage of the exact moment of detonation from street level. No camera on the ground survived that blast. What we do have is raw, jittery footage recorded afterward by Japanese news crews, military survey teams, and later, American investigators. These silent film reels show a world of twisted steel, collapsed bridges, and the skeletal remains of streetcars frozen in place. Walking through the ruins in those first hours was nearly impossible. Verified accounts from survivors describe stumbling through smoke and dust so thick it completely erased the horizon. Many recalled a strange, unnatural quiet that fell over the city, broken only by the crackling of distant fires. One thing historians agree on is that there was no immediate understanding of what had just happened. People were in a state of shock and confusion. Some thought the city had been hit by a wave of gasoline bombs. Others believed a massive explosion had occurred at a nearby weapons depot. The idea that a single bomb could do this was simply beyond anyone's imagination at the time. When we watch the archival footage from ground level today, it's crucial to understand its context. Much of it was shot days, or even weeks, after the blast, not during the event itself. The black and white film captures the skeletal remains of iconic buildings, like the Hiroshima Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall, which we now know as the Atomic Bomb Dome. This footage shows rivers choked with debris and survivors slowly making their way along ruined paths, but the film is silent. It leaves us to imagine the sounds, the smells, the overwhelming sensory experience of being there. As the day went on, firestorms erupted across the city, fueled by the thousands of wooden buildings that instantly ignited. Ground-level footage taken in the aftermath shows bodies covered with cloth near makeshift aid stations. Historical records confirm that the city's medical facilities were completely overwhelmed. Nearly 90% of Hiroshima's doctors and nurses were killed or injured in the initial blast, leaving the thousands of survivors with almost no medical help. And then there was the invisible threat: radiation. Its effects were not understood at the time. People who appeared uninjured, who had walked away from the blast, later collapsed and died from unseen internal damage. Footage filmed by early survey teams shows the horrifying consequences. Children whose hair fell out in clumps, strange skin lesions forming on people's arms and faces, and the haunting stillness of entire neighborhoods that had simply ceased to exist. The Japanese government tried to collect information, but the chaos and a lack of resources made it nearly impossible. After the American occupation began, there were restrictions on filming and documentation, though, thankfully, some crucial footage had already been preserved by Japanese photographers and researchers. Looking at these films today, one detail stands out amidst the horror: the mixture of total destruction and quiet human resilience. Amid collapsed homes and scorched trees, we see survivors moving debris, searching for relatives, and organizing whatever help they could. None of the footage shows panic or chaos in motion. Instead, it captures the stunned stillness that follows an unimaginable impact. Scholars often point out that many of the early photographs were staged. They were taken to systematically document the physical damage to the city, not to capture the depth of human suffering. That's why so much of what happened on that day relies more on survivor testimony than on visual evidence. To understand Hiroshima from the ground, we have to recognize that this was not just a military action. It was a profoundly human moment, filled with thousands of individual stories, most of which were never recorded. The raw footage that survives gives us small windows into the aftermath, but it can't convey the full emotional weight of the experience. It shows us the destroyed schoolyards where children once played, the industrial districts reduced to ash, and the survivors walking in silence through streets they no longer recognized. By late 1945, investigators collected additional footage showing the first cleanup efforts, the construction of temporary shelters, and the very early stages of rebuilding the city. These clips help historians understand how Hiroshima began to rise from the ashes, but they can never fully convey the scale of human loss. What they do offer is context. They show the scale of the blast, the stark layout of a city transformed in a single instant. They allow us to trace the boundaries of the firestorm and to understand the radius of destruction from a human perspective. What this all means is that Hiroshima can't be understood solely through aerial images or abstract discussions. And we must remember that even the footage that exists cannot tell the entire story. It can only point us toward the truth that thousands of people experienced firsthand. Thank you for watching. If you found this perspective valuable, please consider subscribing for more stories that look at history from the ground up.